When we think about creativity, a lot of times we think that it comes from moments of inspiration, that it just kind of appears. And if we dig deeper, we know obviously that that's not true. Like there's plenty of books out there, like The War of Art is a good one, that all talk about that inspiration comes from sitting down and letting your mind focus on that task. So let's say you're writing, that could just mean sitting down for 2 hours and just writing. Even if nothing comes out, even if you just sit there 2 hours and you write one sentence, if you do that every day, you're gonna start writing more. It's gonna start coming a little easier, or at least some days it's gonna come a little easier. And that's kind of what people mean sometimes with inspiration. That's one way to get there. But something that doesn't get talked about as much is outside of that, what also increases basically creativity is rest. Rest is as important as doing the focused work. And why is that? Because rest is when your creativity muscle grows. It's like working out at the gym. Everyone knows that if you work out at the gym, you're doing biceps, triceps, whatever, that yes, it's important to work hard and to work focused, however long you're in the gym, but it actually grows when you're resting. So that's why it's so important. And even nowadays, with top athletes in any sport, tennis for example, they're so good at knowing how to rest, how to optimize sleep. I think that I heard a story that the NBA teams have a sleep expert. That's how important they know that rest is. So why isn't creativity seen the same way? I think it's because rest isn't defined properly. Like, what does that mean? Does it mean just scrolling on Instagram, watching TV? That's not really rest. That's more like zoning out. And I know when I've done that, I don't really feel particularly rested from that. I think it has to be a way of letting your mind relax so that it allows different inputs to come in. And that's very different than if you're distracting yourself or numbing out or zoning out, because that's what you're doing with the TV, with music, with podcasts, because there's inputs coming, something's being told to you, or sound or visuals or whatever. So it's all input being given to you. You're not letting your mind just relax and take things in. And I think that's a big difference, and I think it doesn't really get talked about a lot, especially in our hustle culture. And in a way, rest gets almost like a bad reputation. There's all these gurus that talk about, oh, I hustle, I wake up at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 5 a.m., whatever they're waking up as. I don't wake up at that time. I wake up at like 7:30, 8 a.m. I have no desire to wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. Like when I do that, I don't even feel like I'm functioning that well. Maybe if you go to sleep at like 8 p.m., but it's hard for me to do that because I also feel like I also want to have a social life. I want to hang out with friends sometimes. I want to maybe go watch a movie at night, whatever it is. And 8 p.m., I don't know how people do that. They must really just be focused on productivity and that's it. But anyway, yeah, to each its own. You know, some people are more morning people. For that, it's more natural maybe to wake up 5 a.m. But every person is different. I found for me, it's not natural and doesn't feel good at all waking up at 5 a.m. Doesn't make me more productive, doesn't make me more creative. That 7, 8 a.m. is for me the best. And then also sometimes at night around 10, 11 p.m. I also a little bit more creative. But it's important figuring out for yourself what works. But I think rest is one of those things that's universal. The way to get there, that can be different for everyone. I think there's a couple that work for sure for everyone. One of those is meditation. Obviously, everyone knows about that one. It's been well documented. I think meditation is amazing. I know when I'm very stressed or anxious or overwhelmed or whatever's going on with me, I know that meditation helps me the most because it just kind of lets me feel or take in what's happening instead of distracting myself. And again, I'm not perfect at this, and that's important to know. Like, I think sometimes people don't get started because they're I can't do it more than 2 minutes. That's enough. Like, just start with anything. Even now, like, I have times when I meditate where it comes fairly easily and I want to do it, and then there's times that I meditate and I really don't want to do it. But those are usually the times when I do it, it feels really good because I really needed to do it. But it's still difficult, and I'm not always great on doing it all the time. Sometimes I'm very consistent with it, and then all of a sudden some days will pass by that I don't do it. But I always feel the difference, and I think that's what's really helpful is that once you get to a little bit more clarity with your mind or how you feel, you know what normal can feel like for you. So when it feels different, you start noticing it more. Whereas if you're always feeling here low or you're feeling depressed or whatever, then it's hard to know when you're feeling different because that's your baseline. So it's about raising your baseline, and I think rest is one of the ways to get you there. But meditation, to go back to which ways, meditation is great, but the other one that I think is really, really good is just walking. I like to walk like 30 minutes every day, 40 minutes every day. And usually I do it around lunchtime, maybe after I eat. And I think that's one of the best ways to do it because you're outside, if weather permitting, but you're outside with the sun, just good for you physically, but it's also mentally good for you because you let your mind wander. You kind of let your mind relax. And of course you have to do this in a way that you let yourself relax. So if you're listening to podcasts, which again is not bad, like that's a good thing too. It's just a different purpose for the walk then. If you're listening to a podcast, you're listening to music, you're taking phone calls, maybe you're checking your Facebook, Instagram while you're walking, you're not resting then. It's still good for you physically, but you're not really letting your mind rest. Ideally, you're walking in 30 minutes, just kind of letting your mind wander. And sometimes that's how you come up with the best ideas. I know when I've had problems with something or something I really had to solve, sometimes being in the front of the computer, my mind just it wouldn't get there. Like it just felt like very cloudy sometimes. So then sometimes when I was walking, I would just walk with nothing and not really even really try to think about it that much. But then naturally, because it's been on my mind, came forward I started thinking about it and I came up with better solutions sometimes for some of my problems. Same with creativity. Like if I know when I've written a song or I was writing on a script, I feel like a lot of my best ideas come to me like when I'm on a walk and just letting my mind kind of relax. And I think that's really important to creativity. I think it needs to be balanced with focused work on one hand, where you sit down 2 hours a day, whatever it is, whatever you have time for, an hour a day, and you do focused writing, focus whatever your creative pursuit is. And then the other one has to be balanced out by the rest. And there's a reason that I know for a lot of famous business people, they've come up with a lot of their ideas either traveling or on a road trip. There's a famous Jeff Bezos story that he was on a road trip. I forget from where. I think it was like New York to somewhere, or anyway, I forget which road trip it was, but it was a long road trip. And that's actually when he came up with Amazon, because I think he was working for someone at the time. So while he was on this road trip is when he came up with Amazon. And that makes complete sense because same with travel, you don't have to travel or do a road trip to get inspiration or to get creativity. It just so happens when you're forced to do that or you choose to do that, whichever one, and you're doing that it automatically makes your mind rest more and kind of wander in that way. But you can actually do this a little bit every day. You can do this with 30 minutes of walking, 40 minutes of walking, whatever you have time for. And that's kind of a mini way of doing it. You don't have to wait for this road trip or travel to feel like, oh, I thought about new ideas. So that's something to really keep in mind, that I think walking is one of the best things that you can do. But the most important is also to not fall for this like hustle culture. I know there's like all these gurus that constantly talk about hustling and all this type of thing, working 18. I just saw a video the other day, I forget who it was, where it was like, oh, work 12, 13 hours a day. And it's like, yeah, you can do that sometimes, but you do need to balance it out with rest. You can go through intense periods, but then you got to balance it out with a lot of rest as well eventually, or else you burn out. I know I burned out plenty of times because we're not robots. You know what I mean? We're not robots that can just work endlessly. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, that rest is part of your work. I think that's really key. Like I think for me that helps a lot because I was always very like, if I'm resting, I'm wasting time. I'm not doing what I could be doing. I'm not working on this. But a lot of times when I forced myself to try to work, I was doing terrible work anyway because I was trying to force it, or sitting in front of my computer and all of a sudden I'm just procrastinating for an hour or two, and I'm trying to get myself to work but I can't focus or whatever it is. Instead I could have just gone for a walk and that probably would have helped me a lot more. I think the best way to see it is rest is part of working. Rest is part of productivity. It's something that's very essential, and hopefully as our culture changes and becomes more aware of things, this will become more important. I think it's slowly happening, but it's definitely still a culture of working and being as productive as possible. But I think maybe adding rest as part of that productivity is a different way of seeing it. And I think in this way, it's kind of the key for examining your own life. If you're kind of working like on autopilot all the time, working 12 hours a day all the time, you don't really have time to examine your life, to examine your decisions, and to think like, okay, is this the best path for me? Is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? Is this the best way to be doing it? All the big questions that you should fairly consistently ask yourself, because you don't want to wake up 20 years down the line and be like, oh damn, what did I just do for these past 20 years? And that happens a lot. It's normal. You get into autopilot. So you have to like consciously try to stop that, take breaks in that way, and to ask those questions. And I think rest or walking or anything that relaxes your mind or meditation is the best way to kind of consistently also ask yourself those questions, which I think are some of the most important questions of living a fulfilling life. I hope that helps. If you guys have any questions, or if you've tried a bunch of these things or you're struggling with something, I'd love to hear you guys' experience, and I'll talk to you guys soon.